NTAE. Thanks so much, Melanie. Nate Burt here, NTAE Key Informant, supporting Extension Foundation. Really excited and honored to have each of you here today. As I mentioned, for those who are just tuning in, if you're able to drop into the chat your title within Extension, your institution, and your state, we'd love to know sort of who's here. See a lot of representation from coast to coast and beyond. So really grateful for your taking the time to be here today. Just to give you some quick housekeeping items before we dive into today's materials, this session is scheduled to run 1 hour and 15 minutes. So we'll go about 15 minutes past the hour. So right now where I'm at, it's 1 p.m. Central. We'll go till about 2:15 Central or until we run out of questions or material. We will save plenty of time toward the end of today's session for Q&A, but I want to encourage you, if there are ideas, strategies, questions, insights that crop up as we're going through today's session, please don't hesitate to drop those in. I will take a few moments throughout today's presentation to take a drink of water and scan the chat and make sure I'm not missing anything. And I know our friends at Extension Foundation are wrapping up a great retreat this week off-site. So I will be managing the last half of today's session or so. And so if I appear to be juggling a few things, that's why, but I'll try to be as seamless as possible. And just know that after today's broadcast, you will get from my colleague Melanie with Extension Foundation a copy of today's presentation, a copy of the recording. And so you can rest assured that even if you aren't able to capture everything today in your notes, we will have those materials available for you. I guess I want to start by saying, this is the final session in this calendar year 2025 series of presentations on fundraising and grant strategies. I am hopeful that we're going to be able to kick off a new series perhaps later this year, early next year, TBA on that. But again, if you haven't watched previous installments, the first 6 editions of this series, highly encourage you to go check out the Extension Foundation YouTube channel and check out some of the materials there. We've had some really good conversations about artificial intelligence applications for grant writing. We've talked about strategies for navigating sort of ups and downs of how the landscape, how the economy is changing, what's changing on the funding landscape, and how to pivot to be successful, and much more. So definitely encourage you to take advantage of those resources. All right. Without further ado, I want to go ahead and dive into today's material because we've got a lot of ground to cover. And again, I want to make sure that we are respectful of your time and you're getting a ton of value out of this. We are going to be talking about navigating grant organizations for success. Toward the end of our session today, I will have a quick survey from Extension Foundation for you to give us some feedback about what you thought about today's session, good, bad, and indifferent. I also have a quick survey. And if you stick around till the end, I will have a free resource for you that is designed to be a quick quiz to sort of, and it will give you a customized ranking and roadmap around where you sit within your role in Extension as it relates to thinking about fundraising, communications, and overall just operations. How are you going about your day-to-day and doing the work that really delivers the kind of impact you desire for your clients? So again, if you have to go, no problem. You'll be able to get that in the recording. But if you stick around, you'll get those 2 quick surveys and then that free quiz that I will share with you toward the end. All right. So we're going to be sort of talking about the whole gamut. Today's session is essentially a grab bag. There may be some insights that are pulled from previous sessions, and I hope there's plenty of new material as well, either validating practices you're already implementing as an extension professional who seeks funding, or maybe some new ideas or strategies that you might experiment with. Again, none of this is gospel. None of this is designed to be prescriptive. Rather, what I'm hoping to do is maybe give you some mile markers or things to think about that can anchor how you approach fundraising as we head into the new school year, as we head into the fall and think about planning for 2026. So I always like to start with a few learning objectives. The first today is really going to focus on what are those next level actions and relationship building strategies that you can use to fund the work that you do within Extension at a higher level. So how do you get bigger checks faster with less friction? And also, even more importantly, how do you deliver impact once you have that funding in hand? The second piece, I want you to think about the question of what does the funder that I am pursuing, engaging, conversing with, what do they want now? What's meaningful to them? And how can I help them deliver that? I think we've talked about this in past sessions, but it doesn't hurt to say again, when it comes to any sort of a relationship that involves funding, whether in the nonprofit world or the world of academia, like we're talking about today, or frankly, even in a corporate setting with sales, there is always value being added to the party that's investing, paying those financial resources. And if there's not value being made or created, then why is money being exchanged in the first place? So it's always important to think first about your funder, not about you. And then once you've done that, you're able to sort of align your objectives, your goals within extension to illustrate how you are the best, most qualified person, team, institution to implement those funds in a way that's going to deliver the best possible impact for those funders' dollars. And then finally, we're going to explore ways that maybe philanthropy is changing, get tuned into the way the landscape is changing. Again, we're primarily going to be talking about non-federal, non-state kinds of awards, but I do think the relationship building aspects really apply to any kind of relationship. And then we'll talk about how to adapt your grant relationships for long-term success. Okay, so let's dive in and start talking about sort of the material. So very briefly, I've been working with nonprofits for close to a decade. So that includes, nonprofits, academic institutions, social impact focused organizations. And, in our business, in my business, providing capacity building around fundraising, executive communications, and operating systems that leverage modern technologies like artificial intelligence, also balancing that with training, sort of ethical considerations. How are we balancing some of these tools that have maybe great short-term benefit and potentially some challenges, short, medium, and long-term that we need to navigate and sort of build guardrails around. All right. So how do you define success in grant funding? So if you would, type into the chat, what does success look like for you? Is it attaining a specific dollar figure? Is it having greater confidence in making the ask? Is success in grant funding simply making sure that you're able to keep your operations going for the next calendar year or the next fiscal year? So let me know in the chat sort of where you stand on what success looks like from grant funding. Awesome. I love this. So we see success equals funding. Absolutely. There's not a lot you can do in the absence of funding unless you're just a volunteer, which there's a lot to be said for volunteerism, but you also have to keep the lights on in some way, right? And deliver that impact. For Lori, it means new partnerships and money. For Melanie, unrestricted income. Love it. Flexibility to use those funds how you see fit, the best way it's going to deliver the most value. Jonathan, expanding capacity to meet community needs. Love it. Melanie, building trust and relationships. Yes, 100%. Andrea, keeping our program sustained and growing. Yes, it's not just about the hamster wheel, right? It's about having enough breathing room or oxygen to keep going and keep doing great work. Ramona, money, money, money. I'm hearing a song echoing in my head. I love it. And new partners. So there are way more comments here than I can share, but these are great. Please spend some time with these because I think all of these are reflective of what it means to be successful in grant funding, right? And I'm not just saying actions here. I'm saying outcomes, right? Success means you're able to do the work that matters. You're able to meet your goals within extension, not just fulfill, process orders all day from various funders. It means the impact you're able to have for people like farmers and students and others in a way that gives you maximum flexibility because you are the expert in understanding the impact that's needed and how to get there. So all of those things are really important. When I think about success in grant funding, here are some of the factors that go through my mind, some of which you've already mentioned, right? So the first one is repeatable systems that have very specific strategic actions in them. And when you put those systems and actions together, what it results in is measurable client outcomes, right? You're not just taking money and spending it. You are taking money investing it and delivering outcomes for the greater good, right? For the clients that you serve. You're building, which I saw someone say, trusting relationships with funders, right? In a way that's going to create that kind of sustainability and momentum over the long term, not just in the short term. I also saw that idea come through in the chat. And then sustainable funding at higher levels, right? This is one that maybe makes people most uncomfortable in my experience. It's not just asking for the money that we need to scrape by, it's asking for the bigger dollar amount, the bigger program design, the multi-year, sort of vision, and mapping out what that looks like, and then actually making the ask, which can be daunting, right? It can feel like you have imposter syndrome, like how dare we ask for this amount of money, right? Or that kind of thing. And so I think as we sort of work through this, I'm hopeful this will help you build confidence and courage to make those asks and really dial in that design of your programs, your grant proposals, etc., to really have the best chance of success. The second piece of success is just understanding how the landscape is shifting. And so that means adaptability has never been more important. In our organization, in my company, we really focus a lot on resilience. So resilience of clarity, morale, right? Having confidence, resilience in terms of clear communications externally and internally so that we're always aligned. And finally, flexibility, right? And I see that come through in the chat very clearly, right? You want funds, but you don't just want any funds. You want to make sure that that gives you the freedom to design, to deliver impact in the way that makes the most sense for the clients you serve. Success also looks like understanding funding cycles, right? And really mapping out a plan that you can repeat again and again, and modify as you learn more. So that includes prospecting. Who are the funders that are the best fit? What are the topics or issues that are really attracting funders right now? Which ones are on the upswing? Which ones are on the downswing? Relationship building, something that often gets overlooked, especially once an award is granted and a program has begun. It is very easy and tempting just to set aside the relationship piece or maybe do a regular check-in every now and then as you think of it, rather than something that's done by design. And so I want to encourage you, if you're not already thinking about relationship building above and beyond reporting, then that's something to consider. And then finally, thinking about grant funding as long-term partnership. I saw this come through in the chat as well, right? This is not just, we give you money, you do the work, we say, here's how the money was spent, and then we call it a day, right? It's way beyond that. And I think even more in an age of AI slop, frankly, when people are going to be using AI to write entire grant proposals, when that's really going to be the voice that organizations become known by, that's not how you as extension professionals want to be known, I think, right? That doesn't mean you can't use AI. It doesn't mean AI is not a tremendous resource in your back pocket. It just means that you need to think about how to redefine human-centered, relationship-centered authenticity for 2025 and beyond. All right, next interactive piece. I want you to finish, well, we've done this already, so I'm getting a little backward here. I know I've been successful with grant funding. I think we've seen that in the chat already, so I apologize for the flip-flop here. But you all know very clearly what success looks like for you. It's going to be different for every extension leader. And at the same time, each of those different components ladders up to sort of a holistic picture of all of the things we generally expect success to look like, right? It's impact, it's funding, it's the right amount of funding, it's flexibility. All of those things come into play. So as I look across the funding landscape, as I talk to my clients, as I work with other extension professionals, I suspect these challenges are nothing new to you, but maybe this will just reinforce, if anything, you're not alone, okay? So some of the challenges that I've observed, obviously, funding pullbacks. And candidly, this isn't just the federal government. Let's be clear. There are changes happening across the landscape. In fact, I was talking with a nonprofit outside of the world of academia earlier this year, and he was relaying to me some accounts from the end of 2024 when they actually had put together large-scale programs of work, had basically worked with the funder all the way up to we just need the signature on the contract. And at that point, either the board or someone else said, sorry, we can't do it. The landscape has changed. The economy has shifted. We got to stop the whole thing. And so This is happening from a variety of kinds of institutions. And so consequently, there is certainly higher competition for funding in general, and certainly for the biggest, most public shifts have been on a government level, and so people are very attuned to that and thinking about, okay, how do we start diversifying? Consequently, in theory, that creates more competition with a smaller pool of funders with more organizations lining up. Now, what I'm going to argue in today's session is that you can actually just decide as an extension professional or a nonprofit to make the pie bigger, right? Ask organizations that maybe have never been asked before, would you like to contribute? Would you like to be a part of this journey with us? You would be surprised, I think, at the number of people and organizations that would like to give and engage in some way with extension that aren't today, simply because they've never been asked. That is a hypothesis. If you get out there and you talk to 100 folks and they all say no, let's revisit that. But I suspect that is true based on prior experience, based on how the landscape is shifting. I think face-to-face contact, local relationships, building community, those things have never been more important, and they're only going to become even more important as AI technology becomes infused in everything we do. People are going to crave human connection. All right. Second piece, there's an increased need or desire for measurable outcomes and resilience. The resilience piece we've talked about. The outcomes is simply a reference to this idea that, there may have been an era, and there may still be times when an organization will give you $1,000 or $500 to sponsor an event, for example, without expecting a lot in return. In general, though, I think there is a sense in the philanthropic circles that, look, we invest because we are driving toward better outcomes for society, right? In some cases, that might be the waterways of North America. In other cases, it might be kids in my local school district, and many other stakeholder audiences that you can imagine. The point being, if your organization, if you as an extension professional lack data, stories of impact, evidence of progress, it will be difficult for you to secure sustainable, growing funding. Now, what I know from working with extension professionals in dozens of states for many years is that you all do a tremendous job of capturing those insights, capturing data. Now, could there be more done? Could you have, different organizational systems? Could you compare notes more regularly? Yes, and I think Extension Foundation and other institutions across the system are facilitating that. This is just sort of reinforcing, keep doing that, keep looking and thinking about creative ways to progressively collect data points and impact. And something I learned a long time ago from my business coach, Ed Gandia, is to think about not just KPIs or metrics or data points, but think about what he calls key indicators of progress, right? When you're making change in extension or as a nonprofit, it is often difficult to sort of snap your fingers and say, here's where the change happened, right? Because change takes trust, change takes time, change takes pivoting and learning and adapting. And so finding ways to sort of communicate not just what you're doing, but what you're learning so that you're making your funding partners smarter, better decision makers. You are a true thought partner to them. Those are the kinds of things I'm talking about. There are third evolving funder priorities. So as younger generations, I'm an old millennial, so as millennials and Gen Z and others start to pick up the reins at private family foundations and at other institutions that give out funding, their priorities, their values, the way they think about this, what they expect from their grantees likely will change. Trust is going to be at a premium. There's going to be a need to really think about the issues that align with their values and their funding priorities. That's always been true. And I think it's important for all of us to be active learners and really understand and listen and try to actually get some conversations with funders just to understand maybe what the intergenerational transition might look like and how you can be in the best position possible at Extension to capitalize on that. Two more things. We talked about political and economic shifts. And then the final piece here, proactive engagement. I think it's never been more important to start thinking about how can I get face time with funders, and not necessarily just those who you're actively submitting proposals to, but really just listening in your own community, right? Are there corporations? Are there private foundations? Are there, other institutions, government agencies, et cetera, that we need to be developing a dedicated relationship management strategy for, number one. And then number two, how do we ask the right questions to get the best insights for today and for, 18 months down the road, right? I don't think it's wise to necessarily make a 3-year or a 5-year plan because candidly, the world is changing so fast, especially from a technology standpoint, that today's plan may be moot in 6 months. So there's a balancing act that's required. And I think some of these steps that I've outlined can serve you well. I'm going to take a quick break here and check out everything that is in the chat here. So I see some questions around our recordings being placed on the Extension Foundation website. And thank you, Melanie. Melanie dropped in the chat the Connect Extension website. If you're not already a member of that website, I would encourage you to reach out and request an account. And then once you're in there, you can actually access all the past videos from this series. So definitely check that out. And thank you for the question. Thank you, Melanie, for dropping that in the chat. Okay, I mentioned today is a bit of a grab bag, so I'm going to now walk you through a series of slides about several different topics. The first one being steps to diversifying your funding sources. So as you start to think about how to maintain relationships with grant funders, strengthen those relationships, maybe forge new ones, think first, even before it comes to diversifying, think about some of the things we shared a moment ago around how do I strengthen relationships with active funders, right? And if they're not active today, maybe they've given to us, a year ago or 3 years ago, and then we haven't done anything together since. The best way to sort of start to get traction if you're looking to grow your funding opportunities, if you're looking to do so in a way that's not totally haphazard, start with money that's already in your account, right? That you're using toward impact, toward your programs. And then secondly, start with those who have a warm or at the very least neutral relationship with Extension, right? People who know who you are, they're willing to pick up the phone or answer an email to have a conversation. Start there and maybe start just by sharing, right? You're not asking for anything in return. You're simply sharing, here's what we've been working on. Here are some things that we're doing looking ahead. Tell us about your goals and your priorities. And then maybe the next step is what alignment do you see between what you're working on in your organization and what we're doing here at Extension? That could create some really interesting conversations, and it might even lead to discussions of specific funding opportunities as you look ahead. Now, when it comes to diversification, what I'm talking about here is a couple of pieces. One might be an active or past funder that was invested in this specific program or this specific work stream, and now we're doing something new or different or expanded that they also might be interested in. So maybe you're getting different pools of money from the same funder. Maybe you're getting an expanded pool of money, or the other option is maybe you're going to brand new funders. And that's really what this slide is designed to address, going to someone for the first time. The first thing is just to acknowledge and understand this is a common challenge, especially in 2025. I don't think this is going to change anytime soon, right? The need to have multiple revenue streams to build that sustainability, that flexibility, to give you some risk mitigation if the winds of funding change is really important. So it's okay if you're in this position, you're not alone, and there are resources available for you. The second piece is really think about small and deliberate steps. So I mentioned earlier, sort of coming up with a framework, right? For how do we manage our active relationships and how do we start thinking about what comes next, right? Do we want to start more foundation focused conversations or company or corporate focused conversations? And I always love the model. I mentioned my coach, Ed, and Ed has talked with me a lot from a for-profit standpoint, but I think it applies also to an academic or a nonprofit institution, which is, what are the funders I would love to work with? Who seems, based on my understanding, my research, my past conversations, best aligned with the work that we're doing in Extension? And who would be able to write me the biggest check with the least amount of friction? And then just think about, of the organizations that come to mind, first of all, just get them out on paper, right? List them out. Have a conversation if you are authorized in your institution to work with ChatGPT or something similar. Do a little brainstorming exercise and make a list of, okay, these are the funders, these are the categories, right? Of the foundations I know, I would start with these. Of the companies in my area, I would start with these. These are the government agencies or other types of institutions that we think are a reason to prioritize. And then start thinking about, okay, what are your criteria, right? Which of them do you love working with? Which of them would be the easiest? If they're brand new to you, what would it take to actually get yourself up to speed enough to know who do I talk to? What do I say? What are their current priorities? And use that sort of small exercise to start you down the road of diversification. Again, this is not going to happen overnight, but you would be amazed how much you could get done in a 30-day period if you simply broke out these exercises that I've mentioned, week to week. Focus the first week on listing out all possible funders that you think would be a great fit. Week number 2, force rank them. Week number 3, give that list an edit. Make sure you haven't overlooked anything. Week number 4, make the action plan for which are the first 3 you're going to reach out to. And what is the ask, right? Is it take a 30-minute meeting? Is it let me stop by your office and introduce myself? Is it I'd love to do a 15-minute call just to better understand your goals? Again, all things that you could do probably in 30 minutes or less per week. Okay, number 3, prioritize consistency and learning. So again, I mentioned when it comes to building new funder relationships, it's very important to focus on them less so than you. And so learning, practicing, this is, if you have the system developed, making sure you're doing something every week related to funding diversification. Again, most people see that and say, I'm just going to apply to more grants to different places. That's fine, but why apply to a grant if it's not going to be a really strong fit? And is a grant really the best way to get the highest dollar amount to deliver the biggest amount of impact with the least amount of friction, right? Typically, grants are very intensive. I'm not saying anything about grants. I'm a certified grant writer. I get it. It's very important. And there may be other strategies you can use to sort of shortcut that process in parallel to grants. That's going to allow you to get more traction sooner, continue investing in those relationships, and ideally start bringing more funding in the door sooner. Again, thinking about diverse funding models, right? There are all kinds of different ways that organizations can be funded. Again, not suggesting all of these are appropriate to extension, but something to investigate and get to know better is like, what are all of the ways, whether it's crowdsourcing or donor advised funds and what have you. Again, I think some of these will probably require getting some expert outside help, figuring out if you're even authorized to do some of these at your institution. So maybe deprioritize those that seem super complex or challenging and prioritize those that seem immediately actionable, even if it's just taking a small step forward. And then again, thinking about a strategy and a system of practices that when you implement them over time, it's going to help you mitigate your reliance on a single big source of funding. And again, I think a lot of people over the past 18 months or so have felt, flat-footed, and again, through no fault of their own, right? The landscape changed and they needed to adapt, right, and be resilient. And so again, I've seen tremendous examples of people having great courage, optimism in the face of adversity, and doing some really incredible things. So definitely just remember that the goal is risk mitigation and delivering the best impact you can for your clients. Okay, so the next topic I wanted to address a little bit, and first I'll just dive into the chat and see if there is any comments here. Okay, it just looks like mainly talking about slides and such. Hopefully everyone's able to see the slides. If not, we will definitely get you copies later. Let me pause and ask, are there any questions or comments anyone would like to make? And if someone wants to raise their hand, of course, you're always welcome to come off camera or off mute as well to make a comment or an observation. So let me stop, take a drink of water, and see if anyone has a comment. Then we'll continue. Okay, I'm going to assume that silence is we're tracking, let's keep going, which is great. Please keep those questions coming and I'll be sure to get to as many of those as I can. Okay, so how do you stand out? We mentioned that technology, maybe a seemingly reduced pool of funders creates potential for a competitive landscape, right? How do I set my program or proposal apart from others? And so what I want to encourage you to think about is just sort of a basic framework for standing out. Again, there's never a guarantee. More and more people are going to be using AI tools, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, etc., or something proprietary to their institution to author grant proposals, to pull out the most compelling data points. And so this is going to be shifting sand, right? But I think that these are best practices that will serve you in any landscape, no matter the technological upheaval. And so the first piece is to really know your niche, right? What is the type of work you do within extension that you know better than anyone, right? Okay, theoretically, a machine could learn all these things and train on all these data sets and peer reviewed research. Um, but in practice, the machine has not done the work that you've done to, you know, practice those things, learn from trial and error, get feedback real time, etc. So it's important to document, I think, if you haven't already, what strengths are unique to you and to your extension, you know, your corner of extension. Past successes, things that have worked out, big wins, impact reports, data points, success stories. Capture those in a file, whether it's Google Docs or Drive. However you organize things, it's important, I think, to have this, like, what are our superpowers, right? For lack of a better word. And again, know your topical focus areas, because again, funders typically fund based on specific issues. That will continue to be true, I think, even as we have generational change in funding. And so consequently, it's important to know that your focus areas and topics match those of funders. The second piece is, you know, really think about auditing. Once you've assembled all of those data points and stories and reports, you know, conduct an audit. Like, what trends do you see? And actually, this could be a great use for AI. Again, I'm going to mention this a lot. Some of you may be more comfortable with that than others. If you're not, that's okay. You can do this on your own as well, and it might actually help things commit to memory better. But basically thinking about, what are the dots that I see here, right? What's common, or how did we achieve the same kinds of, pardon me, wins again and again? And what points across all of this data, across all of this reporting, establish our credibility at a higher level? And then also thinking about, you know, of the various work streams or the impact or topic areas where you tend to spend the most time, where are you historically having the biggest and most profound impact? I know that in my experience, again, speaking strictly from a for-profit business standpoint, I could look back over the past 3 years and say, these are areas where we really hit it out of the ballpark. These are areas where we were fine, but maybe struggled a bit. And these are things we tried and experimented with, and they just weren't a fit. And I bet that you could look back at the work you're doing in extension and say the same thing, right? There are things that we do that our clients consistently tell us are so helpful. We're getting tremendous reviews or data points or survey research back that's telling us this. Other things we tried and we're really proud and glad we did it, and it wasn't a great fit. So, you know, think about organizing your information in such a way that you really get greater clarity, because oftentimes when you're so close to the work, those higher level sort of topographical details are hidden to you. And so set aside even, you know, 60 minutes. I would start this exercise alone, and then if there are colleagues that you work with regularly or other partners in other parts of extension across the country, you know, maybe do this as each of you brings insights to the table. Maybe you worked on a program together, so you come back and you say, what really worked about this? Here are some ideas I had. What did you take away? And then compare notes, and that gives you an even stronger picture of what you should be doing next to really deliver the greatest value to funders that would love to work with you. The second piece here is to study the funding ecosystem. And so again, I think this is basically starting with the exercise we mentioned earlier. Who's funding us now? Who funded us in the past? And who do we really want to work with that we think would be super aligned based on our research and would be able to write us the biggest, most impactful check with the least amount of friction? And again, this can be something you and your colleagues do together. It can be done by yourself. You know, talking to people in your local network who may have ideas or recommendations. You know, there are tools out there that I've mentioned before. Instrumental is one that I've subscribed to in my business. You know, doing research about the variety of grants and funding opportunities that are available. And I think this also is a matter of just being a student of pop culture is not the right word, but just the news cycle, right? You know, there are various you know, chronicle of philanthropy and other kinds of you know, free resources out there that publish updates on policies that are affecting giving and donations, you know, trends that you can find, etc. And again, much of that is little to no cost. You can learn a lot, even with, you know, 30 minutes to an hour of study. And then using data and insights on your specific industry or the specific sectors you serve, whether that's health and nutrition, farming and agriculture, really studying, okay, what are professionals in that space talking about? What are researchers talking about? And using that to refine and complement or supplement your grant applications or conversations with funders. Number three is really, again, thinking about strategic relationship building. So this is thinking about ways to begin proactively engaging funders before pitching them, right? And not leading with the pitch or the ask, but rather leading with what are you focused on now, right? What are your goals? And then taking some time to reflect on how do those goals align or not with what we're doing in extension. And my hypothesis based on, experience is that if more organizations sort of thought through that piece and started to build those relationships sooner, it's not going to ever guarantee you $1 of funding. And it is also going to create the awareness of you as a leader, as an expert within extension, of the work of extension in general, as someone who's not in this just to get funds, but to really add value and to create impact together. So this is as much about reputation, trust, and marketing, not to be callous, but it is about marketing yourself, building a brand for yourself as a professional, for extension. And again, often taking this message to folks who've never engaged with extension before, potentially. And I think this can be a really powerful way to start that relationship versus just starting with a proposal and hoping that it gets through a sea of other proposals to win the award. Think about ways to, again, develop a structured plan. It can be 1 page or a half page, right? You can execute it really well for 3 weeks and then fall off the wagon because something else came up and then restart the next month, right? So again, this is something that has to work into your existing calendar. There may be things you have to put on pause or sacrifice, but the reality is, as an extension professional, there are 100 hats you're wearing every day, depending on the time of day. And, finding time for this kind of fundraising progressive activity is really challenging, at least in my experience. And so I don't want that to discourage you so much as to say, look, make this work for you in whatever way is most accommodating to your busy schedule. And then again, if you've collected stories, data points, reports, you can use those stories and pull those insights straight into your conversations with funders, straight into outreach that you're doing, straight into meetings you're hosting, really trying to find ways to save you time and to really create that social proof that shows other funders the good work you're already doing, which is so important. The final piece here that I've mentioned is, thinking about fewer higher impact opportunities. And this one can feel really scary because one of the things that we talked about earlier is the need to diversify funding. And so one would think, well, if you're going to diversify, don't you need to talk to, 10 different funders instead of the one I currently have, or maybe the 2 or 3 I currently have? In some cases, that may make a lot of sense. It requires you to have a clear understanding of the ask. So we need, $25,000 to do this specific program, and we need 10 funders at that level to implement this program of work. Oftentimes, you don't necessarily have that figured out, or if you do, it can be very daunting because let's say you go out and talk to 10 funders and only 2 of them say, yes, we're going to write you a check. We love the project. Then you're stuck, and now you don't just have 10 funders to talk to, you maybe have 20 or 30. And so I think going into the funding process, recognizing that in part it is a volume game, right? The more people you talk to, the more chances you have of success. And it can also be a game of, okay, what is the dollar amount that if we only had 2 funders at this level or 3 of them, it would allow us to do all of the work that we were otherwise going to do trying to ask 10 funders for a smaller amount. So think, as the old adage goes, smarter, not harder. And I think that can serve you really well. Again, not a panacea, but something to consider. And then think about proposals that you've submitted and maybe didn't get funded, as never let that go to waste, right? That was time well spent. You've invested your expertise, you've invested your partnership network in building those out. So as you start to get feedback, if you get rejections or reviewers give you specific points of feedback, you're hearing changes on the landscape, take those, be sure to continue to revisit those old proposals and think about, could this be reframed or recast to meet the moment, to align with funders' goals and leverage all of our talent, in-house expertise, this budget we've already built, make that count and use those opportunities to, again, work smarter, not harder. Okay, great. So moving on, what are some common mistakes? So again, I mentioned we'll have plenty of time for Q&A, so please keep dropping if you have questions in the chat, comments, observations. If this isn't making sense and you're like, Nate, this sounds crazy and totally unattainable, please tell me that too, right? I want you to be brutally honest because I want this to be helpful for you. So what are some common mistakes when engaging funders? I've mentioned one of them already, which is treating funders as sort of an ATM versus a partner. And again, it starts with building a relationship. And I think if you can start that relationship before you ever ask for funding, that's great. Doesn't always happen that way. Another way might be, hey, we're going to submit this proposal, and then we're going to put a strategy in place over the next 90 days to get to know this funder better, to really study what they're publishing, whether it's through LinkedIn, through a newsletter. Maybe they don't have anything published, and we really just want to set a 30-minute conversation. Again, you need to honor whatever your personal, your institutional ethics code is. Obviously, this is not a push to try to influence or persuade a reviewer to, rubber stamp your proposal. I would never suggest doing anything even approaching that, right? What I am suggesting is that if you are truly committed to building long-term financial sustainability, if you are truly committed to building true partnerships that are based on trust, mutual learning, respect, etc., then look for opportunities to start making inroads. Don't just start or stop with the proposal. Think about ways to begin sharing value, adding insights, expressing your gratitude for the opportunity to share your ideas and to learn from them, and focus on their goals. And then, another common mistake, which again, I've alluded to, applying without building a relationship. Again, it's not always practical. In fact, most of the time you probably will be submitting proposals. I guess what I'm saying is think about those grant proposals that are truly a great fit, right? Not the ones that you're like, I'm on the fence. The amount isn't great. It seems kind of complicated. I bet they're going to be hard to work with, but I'm going to do it anyway because we need the money. That's what I'm trying to encourage you to avoid. Instead, what I would say is look for the one or the two grant opportunities per month to really put all of your effort into, and then use whatever time you would have invested applying to bunches of other grants or, going down rabbit trails, perhaps things you've learned not to do in the past, and invest that time in starting to build forward with that relationship strategy top of mind. So number one, design the strategy, right? Number two, think about the best fit funders. Number three, rank the funders and start to work the plan of sharing, knowing the individual people, the faces of that funding organization, understanding what their priorities are, what are their goals, and then looking for opportunities, whether you're going to the same conference, you're hosting an event with your community and you can invite them, look for opportunities to start making those connections. And it all begins with the strategy. And then the last piece, which I alluded to earlier, but I want to sort of drill home, if this is not something you're already doing, is this idea of having a very rigorous process for follow-up and engagement. Too often, there is sort of the idea that once we have an award in hand, we are going to go do the work, and then we will report back when it is done, or we'll report back on a quarterly basis, or whatever the funder asks. Now, not all funders, as you all know better than anyone, want that kind of a, mushy relationship, right? Some of them just say, this is what we want to do. We want to avoid a lot of paperwork and drama. We want the work done. It matters to us for these reasons. Go and do the work, right? In other cases, I think funders are looking for learning, right? They have a very defined scope of work that spans multiple grantees. If that is the case with a specific funder, you will likely see this because their websites, their marketing assets are much more advanced than some maybe more private, less defined foundations. They're going to sort of explain their theory of change, and you're going to see pretty quickly, okay, we align with these aspects of their theory of change. Here's how we could support. And so again, for funders like that, if you get the sense in talking with them or viewing their materials online that, look, they're serious about this, they have a whole plan of work, we can nest into that. If you want to build a long-term, trusting, expansion of funding kind of relationship, the best way to stack the deck in your favor is to build a relationship through learning and adding value beyond just delivering the work. So use that and think about that as a way to assist you in your work. Okay, so I want to pause. I'm going to take a drink, check out the chat, and I want to ask how. Start with this first question: how do you engage funders today beyond just reporting? Because I suspect that some of you, in fact, many of you, may already be doing this. Right? You have regular touch points. You are sending messages. Maybe it's happy birthday. Maybe it's, hey, check out this new report we released. Maybe it's, hey, great seeing you at the basketball game the other day. I guess this is football season, so the football game the other day. But tell me in the chat, how are you engaging funders? Because I think we can learn a lot from each other, and then I will dive back in. Okay, I'm not seeing. Oh, maybe I have. Yeah, here we go. This is great. Okay, so Dory's using a newsletter. Fantastic. That's great because you have a list of emails and contacts you can reach out to again and again. Awesome. Jan, collaborative working groups. Ooh, I like that. Right, bringing people together, um, being seen as peers and like partners, not just like transactional. That's fantastic. Ramona, great to see you at. Yep, telling them just like, hey, it was really good to see you. Make the connection. Sharing recent program updates and success for future alignment. Yes, fantastic. And I think that's great, right? You're saying, here's what's going on, here's what's working. We ran into a roadblock, or we learned this new thing. We're thinking about maybe doing this in the future. What are your thoughts on that? Again, you're in the driver's seat as the implementer of the grant, and it can be really great to just get some outside perspective, share what's going on, and that'll set you up for great future conversations. Marcia, ooh, I love this one because I love coffee. Do you have time for a cup of coffee and conversation? Yeah. And again, this doesn't have to be like, I need your whole morning, right? Because lots of these folks are extremely busy, just like you all are. But even, 30 minutes at the coffee shop, or if you don't have time to meet in person, let's have 30 minutes and we'll drink our coffee or tea over Zoom and we'll catch up, right? That's brilliant. I love that. Yep, Melanie, inviting people to your programs and events. Carrie, inviting folks to events and when possible, including them as presenters. Yes, like giving them a chance to share their insights, their expertise. Beautiful. Jake, getting to know their priorities and motivation behind their work. Yes, I love that. Like understanding the deeper meaning, right? I know from talking with many extension professionals over the years, you all are not just in this because it's a day job, right? Extension professionals do this because they care, because they took the time to get the necessary education. They're passionate about connecting research and insights to everyone who can use it and benefit from it. So yeah, understanding in a similar way the perspectives, background, journey of your funders can be so valuable. Yeah, personal motivation. Exactly, Jake. Love it. Well, these are all great ideas, and I think it's so helpful to see how you all are doing this already. Now I want to sort of flip the script and say, what is something you would like to try, but maybe you aren't doing it today? So what's something you might like to try for engaging funders or building that relationship even at a next level that you aren't doing today that you'd like to experiment with? So I'll pause and ask for your thoughts on that question, and then we'll jump ahead to the next slide. All right, Dory, thank you for your being vulnerable and jumping in. Tina, thank you. So Dory says giving a proposal presentation like on the movie Contact, where she presents to potential funders. Love that, a proposal presentation. I think that sounds cool. Maybe there's a meal to go with it. Maybe there's I mean, again, you gotta use your discretion as to what is acceptable and ethical. But finding ways to make it warm and inviting and exciting for people to get behind the vision, that's brilliant. I need to go back and watch the movie Contact. I'm pretty sure that I've seen that, but I need to go check it out and sort of take some notes. That's great, Dory. Tina says, I work with the 4-H military partnership, and I would like to go to veterans groups to talk about the work I'm doing with military connected youth. Yeah, I love that idea. And Tina, as I'm sure you're already thinking in this direction, but those veterans groups are going to have deep contacts across the military, across veterans communities. And even if they're not the funders themselves, they will likely know people who can step up to the cause. I've had a lot of conversations recently outside of my work with Extension with veterans groups, right? Groups that are focused on mental health, groups that are focused on just supporting veterans and their families in general. So I think that's it seems to be a very hot topic and for good reason. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I love that. Tina says, attend many community volunteer events to network with funders and look at what is being done that the funders care about. Yeah, just getting a sense of like, what is the conversation that's happening? What are people talking about? Getting to see them face to face and build that connection in person. I think that's so important. So love all of those things. Okay, so these are all great. Oh, and Dory says create collective action initiatives in the community. Yes, like what are some plans or some initiatives, maybe multi-year, very targeted, dedicated work we could be doing together. Shirley says, I'd like to start a school for nurse assistants with resources for students to move up the ladder. Yes, thinking about career paths that are always short on skilled talent, finding ways to plug in and be helpful. Again, thinking creatively about building a school or things that have never been done a certain way to provide that education, that engagement and outreach. Love all of these. These are great. Thank you. Okay, so before we jump ahead, I want to let you know that there is a quick survey that Melanie and the team would love for you to take. I'm going to pause my screen and, actually, I'm going to go ahead and drop this in the chat. Well, I don't think that link is going to, maybe the link will work. Let me just, if someone would test that link and let me know. So this is a survey that Extension Foundation would love for you to take just to give them some feedback on today's session, what worked, what didn't work, what you want to know more about in the future. If you wouldn't mind finishing that, especially if you have to drop off at the top of the hour, that would be great. Again, we will stick around here until 15 minutes after the hour. So we're here for another about 25 minutes, but please go ahead and do that survey if you would mind. That'd be super helpful. Tina, awesome. Glad it works. Thanks for confirming that. Okay. So we talked a little bit about how the philanthropic landscape is changing. So I just had a few more thoughts and resources on this idea of, millennial-led foundations and other institutions. So I don't think any of these trends are necessarily new to anyone, but I think it bears repeating. Increasingly funding institutions are looking at systems level change. Now, there are plenty of funders out there who are still looking to make a difference in their local city or county or in a specific industry. And there are also those that are really looking at broader systems change, right? How does this investment in this small region or area or pilot ladder up to bigger impact across my community, across my state, across a specific profession? So think about systems change and how Extension can be a conduit for change that sort of maybe takes something small or mid-sized and can be the learnings from that, the insights that are gleaned from that work can be widely distributed and benefited from. The next piece is trust-based funding. I do think that more funders are going to expect, there's maybe going to be skepticism or cynicism about everyone who is using, basically giving everything over to AI and letting it handle all the proposal development, etc. There's going to be a premium on human-centered relationships. There may be some funders that just use an AI to sort through all the AI-generated proposals and make scoring and assignment decisions. That's sort of the dystopian future. My hope is that there is, a rebalancing that happens whereby, yes, AI can be leveraged as a tool, and those who have the longest, most productive, impact-wise and financial-wise relationships are those that are very human-centered. So trust is going to be important, building a relationship with funders and through direct engagement. So thinking about how your work has greater social impact, has greater resonance beyond the specific program you're recommending is really important. Again, I think that's been true for quite some time, but it's important to say again. Engaging funders in ideation and collaboration, right? Someone in the chat earlier mentioned, hey, having these like working groups, sharing regular updates and getting feedback, right? The idea here is that you're not just sort of baking a program and delivering it. You have baked the program concept and you've got the skeleton outline, so to speak. And then you're actually engaging the funders to really deeply understand their goals and think about, does my program design address that? Or are there modifications we can make where it's a real win-win for both extension and for the funder? And then finally, reducing reliance on restrictive funding. I saw this come through in the chat repeatedly, right? You want flexibility, unrestricted funds ideally, or at least some percentage of the funds that give you the latitude to do your job. Um, so I think thinking outside the box, both in terms of program design, funding requests, really understanding and helping funders understand maybe the limitations or the opportunities that could be unlocked if they were willing to change their criteria or adjust their criteria for extension to be a better partner to them. Again, you don't know until you ask. It may be a non-starter for many, but there might be 10% of folks out there who would say, well, I understand what you're saying, and we're willing to adapt our funding framework to better suit extension competing for these awards. And then when you get the slides later, all of these little icons will be linked to stories or resources that I personally think might be helpful to you as an extension professional on this topic. Okay, so my question for you here is, how might shifting your priorities for fundraising, how you are approaching decision makers, how could that, the question I think as I'm reading it now is kind of confusing. I think what I'm saying is, based on everything you've heard so far, there's a lot that I've said that maybe sounds like, oh, Nate, that sounds like a ton of work, or this sounds like super overwhelming. I don't know where to start, or I know where to start, but man, it sounds painful. I want you to reframe. I was listening to a podcast today talking about the fact that positive thinking is positively correlated with a lower incidence of dementia, Alzheimer's, etc. Obviously, cognition, mental health, brain health is addressed by many different factors, but one of them these brain researchers were talking about was related to positivity. So what I want you to do is think about what could be great about this, right? Is it that it's going to break you out of the mold and get you to challenge your thinking? Is it that there's a funder or an opportunity you've always wanted to do but never felt the permission to pursue? What could be great about anything we've discussed, right? Pick a topic or come up with your own, but what could be great about rethinking how you are approaching funders for the long term? Go ahead and drop a thought in the chat, and then we will wrap up with a few more slides, that quiz, that free resource that I mentioned, and your questions. All right, so I love the comments coming in the chat. Thank you all. Dory says it will feel so good when we get the first monies related to our efforts. Yes, like picture that moment when it's like, man, all the work that I've done, the planning, the rethinking of this process, it's paid off, right? Literally for the impact and for your program. And it's also given you greater confidence that, hey, if I could do it once, I bet I could do it again, right? I bet I could ask for even more and do even greater good with what I ask for. So I love the idea of sort of picturing that moment. I went through an exercise with my coach last winter to make a vision board for this year. And man, looking at that on my wall every day with pictures of like what the world, what my business will look like, what my family will look like, the vacations we're going to go on, the things we're going to do to change the world, even in our own backyard, it's really powerful to see that visually. So consider something like that, right? That is in front of your face every day. Put a number, a dollar figure, put some pictures up there from magazines or screen grabs from your favorite websites showing like what the world will look like, and use that to encourage yourself. I think that's a really powerful tool. Let's see here. Jake says, I think I would approach proposals with prioritizing communicative funders who are open to calls and personal connection rather than funders who are less responsive. Yes, I think you can learn a lot really quickly, Jake, from who's responding to me, who's open to conversation, who's not. Now, there's an art and a science to doing the outreach in a way that generates a response or that impels people to respond. And I think you're onto something there. It's a great idea. Tessa, with the funding landscape shifting so much, groups that had previously been closed off to exploratory collaboration are more open. I love that, Tessa, like thinking about what changed in the landscape that's getting people's eyes open to the possibilities. Lynn, less reliance on hiring grant writers and more on building relationships, which is way more rewarding, right? Building that personal connection. I think that's so huge. And again, grant writers have their place, right? I'm sure all of us have written a fair amount of grants in our day. And getting to know people and building those deep relationships is way more powerful. Again, grant writing has a place. It can be powerful in terms of getting funding, and it's also a different mindset, right? A different set of skills. And then Ralph says nothing is easy. Absolutely, right? Nothing in life is easy. And oftentimes, the things that are most rewarding, the most enriching, are the things that require us to do a little bit of homework. So fantastic. I love that. Okay, I am going to jump ahead. There are several slides here that I will go to if time permits and we don't have a lot of questions. Again, I want to prioritize your questions first. On your screen is a quick quiz, or a quick survey from me personally. So this is just helping me know where can I improve, what worked well for you today. And I also included a very specific question, which is, if we do this series again for late 2025 or in 2026, what topics do you want to hear about? So it's an open-ended question. You can list as many as you want, separated by commas. I really want to know, how can I personally serve you and the extension community best? And I recognize that today's session, or perhaps past sessions, have sparked some ideas or topics that you'd like to know about. So if you're able to, scan this QR code or go to this URL, enter the code NAVIGATE, and give me some feedback. That would be so helpful to me, and I really appreciate it. Okay, so hopefully everyone's got this down. I want to go ahead and go back to that free resource I mentioned, and then we'll revisit some of those slides if we have time. Okay, thank you in advance for filling out the extension quiz first, my survey second, as time allows, and then letting me know what topics would be of interest to you. Okay, I promised you a quiz. So this quiz was specifically designed by my team for nonprofit, so not specifically for an academic institution. So there may not be a one-to-one parallel, but I would love for you to check this out. If you want to give me some feedback, that would be fantastic, but it's certainly not an obligation. The goal of this quiz is to get you to say, look, across those areas of resilience that I mentioned. So first is morale, right? Having confidence, having optimism in the process, feeling like you have the skill set to seek funding at a higher level. The second being clarity, right? How are we communicating about what we do as extension? Where are the opportunities to improve? And then finally, flexibility. Are we leveraging technology? Are we leveraging our partners and team to really get the most value from our fundraising efforts? This is basically a quiz you can take in less than 2 minutes. I think it's about 8 questions. You'll get a custom report sent to you via email and a custom score with some recommended actions. And then if there's ever a time, and again, this is not a sales pitch whatsoever, I talk with organizations about these things for free all the time and sort of say, okay, what are your goals and situation? Let's talk about some ideas that might make this more applicable to you. So again, free resource. I hope this can be helpful to you. I always think it's fun to sort of do rankings, even if they're very broad brush and not very specific to my situation. It maybe gives you some ideas or a next step to think about based on today's conversation. So I hope that's helpful to you, and I hope it's fun digging in along the way. Okay, so we asked this question. We had a lot of great comments in the chat. I want to just take a look at the chat, and then I'll share a couple more ideas before you go today if there are no other questions. Marcia says, decades ago, there was a specialist from Cornell who was invited to talk during state annual conference. His focus was relationship marketing. Oh, that's very interesting. I think you might be interested in taking a look at those materials. Marcia, that sounds super interesting. I don't know if those are like available online or if there's anything you could share in the chat, but if you have a URL or a website, feel free to drop that in. You can also email that to me at nateburt. I'll just drop my email in the chat here, nateburt@extension.org. If you send anything you find to me, I would be happy to make sure, when Melanie sends out the resources, that everybody gets a copy. Thank you for sharing that. That sounds like a really great resource. Okay. Again, if you have questions or thoughts, please drop in. While we have about 10 minutes left, let me just share a few parting thoughts. And again, this is a grab bag, so it's going to be kind of all over the map, but I hope maybe some of this is striking a chord or at least validating practices you're already implementing. I shared toward the start of our conversation today that I think based on experience, based on hearing from funders, measuring and demonstrating impact continues to be a top priority. And it means different things for different people, but in general, again, starting with something like a logic model and mapping how you deliver outcomes is really important. Now, I think I actually learned about logic models and this sort of thing from my work with extension. So Many of you may already have logic models and so forth for your specific corner of extension, for specific programs you're doing, etc. And if you don't, I think it's a great opportunity to clearly be able to illustrate to yourself and sort of crystallize your thinking around of those programs that where we've had the greatest success for clients and we've had the best feedback. What did we do that worked, right? What were the inputs? What were the activities? What were the outputs? What were the short, medium, and long-term outcomes? Um, just doing that exercise either by yourself or with a small group can really be clarifying. And I think you can infuse those insights in every proposal you submit, every funder conversation you have. It really helps others understand clearly, who are not deeply involved in your work, what it is that you do, how you show up and make change, and what makes you unique. Um, Data, I think, again, is really important to the degree that you can capture that, right? So metrics of success, quantitative metrics, evidence-backed reporting tools, resources that have been developed within your institution, free resources that are available online. Anything you can do for whether it's a survey or forms that people fill out at an event. Again, it can be large, it can be small. It doesn't have to be a giant multi-year, meta-analysis or anything like that. But again, data is powerful. The next thing I mentioned earlier, key indicators of progress, this is more of those qualitative insights. What are the signs or signals that we're moving in the right direction to deliver the kind of impact we want for our clients? So think about, capturing behavior shifts, attitude shifts, things that reflect how you are beginning to move in a different direction, in a positive direction. Storytelling and case studies. Again, these are very common. Extension uses these broadly all the time, but videos, testimonials, right, written articles, compelling narratives that really personalize who it is that you're working with, potentially even the voices of funders who are supporting your work within Extension, why they continue to be invested, the value that they're seeing, how it's shaping their thinking as a funding institution. And then the last piece, which again has sort of been woven through today's session, consistent progress reporting, value sharing, and also just sharing of learnings, right? Insights that you're gleaning. Engaging funders beyond just those regular required reports and adding something of value beyond the baseline. Sharmika, thanks so much for the comments. Glad this has been helpful. I appreciate your comment. Okay, so partnerships are very familiar to everyone in Extension that I've ever met. I'll reinforce and validate, like, they are powerful for many different reasons. I've identified 5 of them here. Number one, strong collaborations, they enhance credibility. You have other people demonstrating the power of your work, not just you sort of singing from one songbook by yourself. You're in part of a choir that's working on this initiative together. And you're demonstrating impact together. You're delivering that impact together. When you define clear roles, this is the role of Extension or individual Extension professionals. These are the roles for specific partners. What you get is a program that has compounding value because you're able to sort of leverage the superpowers of the individuals who make up that group. And so rather than people doing work that they're okay at, everyone ideally, in theory, is doing work that they're great at. And so consequently, the work feels easier. You have more energy, not less, when you're done at the end of the day. You're able to get to the outcomes you desire faster and think about what comes next and dream bigger. Again, when you define clear roles, either within Extension or across a partnership. Again, it also is a demonstration of maximizing return on investment, right? You're bringing together not just your hands and brain to get the work done, but you're also bringing your social capital, right? The relationships you've built, the trust you've built to bring others along with you on that journey to deliver that impact. You're extending the reach and effectiveness of funding. You're really able to think critically because you have more seats at the table. And you're building longer term coalitions. I saw someone talking about, community specific initiatives, and I love that idea, right? What does our community need? How can Extension be a driving force for good? And what does that vision look like? Mapping it out, bringing the right stakeholders to the table. Again, that adds so much value to funders and more importantly to the clients you're all looking to serve. Okay, so final slide here, long-term fundraising success. Again, I think the first step to greater stewardship is thinking less about one-time grants and more about sustainable funding partnerships, right? Partnership is an ace in the hole for Extension. This is something you all do wonderfully. You're trusted. You are You know the language of your local community, literally and metaphorically, right? You know what pushes their buttons and what doesn't. You know various sectors, the clients you serve, and their nuances. Use those insights to build partnership, not just with your clients, but with the funders, right? And thinking about holistically, how do we create a portfolio of funders who are as or more bought in than we are at Extension, which would be hard to do more than Extension is already bought in. But again, those are the kinds of people you want, not just the people who are neutral or lackluster, the people who are on fire for your work. These 5 pointers in the middle, I think this is pretty obvious, but I'll restate them. Do what your funder requires, right? The minimum viable product, the most ethical, honest, full value you can possibly add. Secondly, communicate proactively when there are changes once you have an award. Over deliver once you have that award in hand to the degree that's possible. Illustrate how current funding is going to lead to future impact, and always share value and learnings, and always cast a vision for what comes next, right? You can't guarantee that a funder is going to stick around for 2 or 3 or 4 years, and you can also socialize the possibility by thinking that far ahead yourself and coming to the table prepared for those conversations. And then engaging funders in collaborative discussions about the future. Again, you all are doing this already. I see some wanting to do it even more. This is a team effort. Think of funders less, maybe in the past we thought about funders as sort of this monolith or institution that's off on the mountaintop, and we have to sort of, as the peasant people on the ground, climb the mountain, and those who are most successful get to the top and get entry into the castle to speak with the funder, right? I guess I'm not sure why I'm alluding back to feudal times, but at any rate, if we think about that analogy, I think today we're more like we are all part of the same community, right? And yes, organizations have funding available, resources. They can seem unapproachable or maybe cold or neutral to what we're doing. And the reality is these institutions, at least today, before artificial superintelligence takes over or whatever, are run by people, right? People like you and me, people who have priorities, values, goals. And so the more that we can invest in collaboration and partnership, even at the funder level, the more opportunities that unlocks, the more possibilities it creates for the clients that you serve. All right, that is my sort of final piece. Marcia dropped into the chat. So this resource on relationship marketing from Cornell Extension. So I will look this up if I can find a link online. This is super helpful and exactly what I needed. We'll make sure to share that with the group. And we'll put that in the email from Melanie. That is the end of today's session. We have 2 minutes to spare. So if there's a final question or comment, I would welcome those. Otherwise, I want to be honorable and respectful of your time and just say thank you so much for being here. I hope this has been valuable to you. Thank you so much for being a part of this series. Some of you have stuck around for many of these, and I wish you a wonderful start to the fall semester. If I can ever be a resource or the Extension Foundation team, please don't hesitate to reach out, and thank you all so much. And I saw a question in there from Tina about the code. Let me just go confirm that. The code was navigate. Thank you for asking. I appreciate your question, Tina, and for participating. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.